We're trusting AI with some pretty big decisions. Who gets a job? Who gets a loan? We assume it's fair, right? I mean, it's just math. But what happens when that math goes wrong? Today, we're diving deep into algorithmic bias, a world where the very systems we build to be objective end up doing the exact opposite. So let's just get right to it. It's a simple question, but it's a big one. Can a machine be unfair? I mean, it's just logic, right? Code and numbers. How can that be biased? Well, it seems like it shouldn't be possible, but the answer is a huge yes. And the reason why? Well, it's a lot more human than you'd probably guess. Okay, so picture this. You're on a hiring team and you're all excited because you've got this new AI that's going to sift through thousands of resumes for you. Awesome, right? But then you start looking at the shortlist it's giving you and you think, hang on, another batch of candidates that are almost all white men? This is weird. And look, this isn't just some made-up story. This is a real-deal problem that some of the world's biggest companies have had to grapple with. So how in the world does something like that even happen? To really get it, we need to look at a real story. So let's jump into our first section, a machine that discriminates. So there's this major tech firm, right? They build an AI to screen job applications. And at first, it's incredible. It's a total game changer, saving just tons of work. But then they spot this pattern, a really disturbing one. The AI's top picks, they're almost always men. And the developers, they're completely stumped. They swore they built the system to be gender blind. But after digging in, they found out the AI had taught itself a biased shortcut. It learned to penalize resumes that had words like women's in them, like captain of the women's chess club. It saw that as a negative. In the end, this amazing, promising system had to be completely shut down. And that brings us right back to that fundamental puzzle, doesn't it? If the computer is just running on math, pure logic, how on earth did it learn to discriminate? To figure that out, we gotta pop the hood and see what's really going on inside. And that's exactly what we're gonna do in our second section. We're gonna find the answer by looking at the bias in the code. Okay, here's the absolute key to understanding all of this. AI systems aren't just biased out of nowhere. They're biased because they're made by us. They're like mirrors. They learn from the data we feed them, and they're designed by people who have their own unique perspectives and, more importantly, their own blind spots. And when we talk about that human element, take a look at this. At the world's leading AI conferences, a whopping 82% of the researchers presenting their work are men. Now think about that. When the brilliant minds building these incredibly powerful tools come from such a similar background, is it really a surprise that the systems they create might end up with a pretty narrow and pretty biased view of the world? So this problem really boils down to two main culprits. Think of them as two paths to bias. The first path, it all starts with the data, the stuff the AI learns from. And the second path, the bias is literally built right into the algorithm's design. Let's break down each of these. First up, let's talk about the data. Bias can sneak in here in two big ways. The first is what we call unrepresentative data. Simple example, facial recognition. If you train it mostly on pictures of light-skinned men, its error rate for darker-skinned women can shoot up to a staggering 35%. The data just doesn't represent everyone. But then there's a second, much trickier problem. Accurate but unjust data. This is when the data is a perfect reflection of the real world, but our world has its own biases. This is exactly what went wrong with that hiring AI was talked about. They fed it 10 years of real resumes from a male-dominated field. So what did the AI learn? It learned to prefer men, because that's what the accurate data showed it. All right, so the second source of bias is the algorithm itself, how it's designed. This happens when the model picks the wrong thing to measure as success. And there is a truly chilling real-world example of this. A major US healthcare algorithm was supposed to predict which patients were the sickest so they could get more care. But instead of measuring sickness, which is hard, it used a shortcut or a proxy, healthcare costs. The thinking was higher costs mean sicker person. But here's the problem. Historically, Black patients have had less access to care, so they have lower healthcare costs. So the algorithm looked at that data and made a terrible conclusion. It decided they were healthier. And because of that, it literally locked them out of getting the extra care they desperately needed. So you can see, this isn't just some abstract, technical problem for developers to worry about. This stuff has huge, real-world consequences for every single one of us. And that brings us right into our third section. And look, the stakes here are just massive. I mean, AI is set to add something like $15.7 trillion to the global economy by 2030. That's an incredible opportunity. But, and this is a huge but, if we want to actually capture that value, we have to get this right. Because when bias creeps into these systems, the price we pay is absolutely enormous. And I'm not just talking about money. Think about the hidden costs. You've got almost half of all firms, 42%, saying they're extremely worried about their brand's reputation. You've got customers losing trust. You've got projects worth millions being scrapped. You've even got employees protesting and walking out. But the biggest cost, the one that's truly scary, it's the risk of taking the discrimination that already exists in our society and amplifying it, putting it on autopilot at a massive scale. Okay, so the problem is clear. The stakes are incredibly high. The big question now is, what can we actually do about it? Well, that's what our final section is all about, a playbook for fairness. Now, the first thing we have to get straight, and this is probably the most important point, is that the goal is not to create a perfectly unbiased AI. Honestly, that's just not possible. It's a myth. Why? Because these systems are learning from our world, which is full of flaws and biases. So a little bit of that is always going to creep in. The real goal, the achievable goal, is to stop chasing perfection and start actively managing and mitigating that bias with smart, deliberate actions. So what does that actually look like? Well, the playbook really comes down to 3 big moves. First, build better teams. That means diverse, multidisciplinary teams and creating a culture where people feel safe to speak up about ethical issues. Second, develop the AI model responsibly. This is all about being super careful with your data and setting firm rules for what fair actually means for your algorithm. And third, establish strong leadership and governance. You need clear oversight from the top, and you need to use your influence to push for change across the entire industry. Which really leaves us with one final crucial question to think about. AI is going to shape our future. There's no doubt about it. It's going to have a say in who gets hired, who gets a loan, even the quality of medical care we receive. So the real question for every single one of us is, who gets to write the rules?